Thank you for watching this Ring of Red video. I realize that I haven't uploaded any of these videos in a while, and I sincerely apologize. I've had, things in between. Well, I'm doing voice acting because... well, voice acting, right. I'm voice commentary because text was great, but it was just too time consuming for me to do it in every video in a long series. Well, let's see what advice the game has for us for this one. Yeah, we're really in for it this time. They are not kidding about how strong these guys are. No, that's not what we mean. Or rather, I actually suspect that the level was changed after this briefing was done, because if white phosphorus shot, well, tear gas, was actually the thing that they used all the time and was their signature move, then the map would be much easier. I really wish that was the thing to worry about. Well, we'll see what they actually do when the mission starts. But let's also talk about Ippei. He's joined us, and that unique combat arm, yeah, that arm is something special, alright. As he says, he's not very good at shooting. But we'll get to that later. Let's take a look at the setup. Weizsäcker is basically unchanged. I have him still using the setup with the recon, which helps him shoot accurately, and the shooter for damage, of course. Ryoko has been changed because the setup that I start with in the map is kind of weird, and I need her to pull anti-soldier duty at the start. But she's done it before. She's pretty good at it. Kenichi Kinasato, I'm sorry, is the same, of course, because he's amazing at what he does, and this troop setup is doubly amazing. And John is switched from anti-AFW to anti-soldier duty, once again because of the weird startup, and that's pretty much the only setup that allows him to do things for a fairly large part of the map. Instead, Ayana is taking the finishing blow role, with shooters, of course. And this is actually rather helpful because she needs the experience. I think, yeah, she's level 8 and most of our other people are level 10. Or at least level 9. We gotta fix that. Jun is once again a hybrid build, but last time I found out that having an offensive skill of some sort helps a lot, so that's what I'm giving him. The rest is the same. Now, Ippei. That's an interesting one. Well, the short of it is that we need cleanup and repair, of course. I think I talked about the needs and weaknesses of an anti-AFW before. And if we take a look at his stats, yeah. See that 95? I don't exactly know how that translates to actual damage, but it is by far the thing that he does. He desperately wants to go up and punch things, and we should be able to arrange that. Also, the tank that he's, or the machine that he's in is based on the Type 97 Chi-Ha, which I'm quite certain I pronounced improperly. It was, well, it doesn't look very impressive tank-wise. Speaking of which, take a look at that body design. It really looks like they just put legs on a tank chassis. Anyway, the Chi-Ha was deployed with a specific purpose in mind. It is to put tanks where the enemy either doesn't have tanks or isn't expecting them, and it served that role quite well, actually. Well, now, I know it's kind of a joke, or at least the game presents it as one, but having Emilio with us would help a lot. Okay, maybe late in the map he would just be part of the clutter, but right at the start I'd love to have another AFW on my side. Oh well. So I don't know when or if people quit the game when they get started, but if that was going to happen, I would guess that this is one of the levels that had a high player casualty rate. It is a very sharp increase in difficulty, which, I mean, makes story sense because these are the guys that they send to deal with people like us. Like, I don't really blame them because we're guerrillas, right? The whole point of this Liberation Front is that the powers that be usually don't know where we are. However, we're stuck here because we're resupplying AFWs and helping all of the prisoners out of the prison camp, whatever the hell that is. And so we're stuck, and they know where we are. This is a chance for them to deal with us for sure, so of course they're going to send their best guys. As for why this prison camp is so important to them, I guess it's a pride thing, but mostly it's just a chance to get rid of us for good. That's the main thing. Also, Ryoko, no, you will not get into a punch battle with these things. You are crazy. Which is, I actually like what they did with the writing there, because Ryoko is usually not that crazy. She was the level-headed one near the start, so this large deviation of character is a really good indication that something is up. Now, one of my bigger debates when figuring out how to tackle this was to whether to have Jun stay in place or move forward to hold the bridge. And the reason is, it's a bit easier to counterattack from different angles if Jun stays back a little bit. However, it also gives the enemy more space to move, and I eventually decided that it's better to just close off that extra tile. It also means that fewer enemies will attack Ippei, and I need him kind of fresh for something later. So, see that ink trap shell that they immediately loaded? That's the thing to watch out for. So we've already talked about special shells. We've dealt with the AFW killing shells, because that's what we saw last mission. But there's also anti-soldier shells, which we've also seen a little bit. There's incendiary, which I used a couple of times. It's heavy damage to one unit thing. And then there's shrapnel, which is attack both enemies if they're up front thing. And then there's ink trap, which has the strengths of both of them. It's crazy. There's a reason I don't have any of them. However, in this map, there are many enemies that use it, and it is nuts. I still haven't completely figured out how to play around that. Of course, part of it depends on the AFW you're fighting. Like, if you're facing, I don't know, an anti-AFW at longer range, it still won't do much because it's an attack multiplier, but something like this at short range, I don't know. Of course, they shoved my units back, so it's not going to fire the ink trap right away, but... well, you get the idea of why I have to play so cautiously around this. Also, even though they use older model AFWs for the most part, you'll notice that their health is really strong. Quite a bit stronger than the last few missions. I guess that black paint has something special mixed in. And, of course, there are other stats. Well, I'll take a closer look at it later, but their other stats are also, of course, improved a notch or two. And the armor of some of those infantry squads is ridiculous. Well, or at least it feels that way sometimes. Oh, that's not good. And the reason that's not good is I really don't want one of my squads to get weakened a lot before they start throwing the ink trap around. I say that the worst enemies to have ink trap, and they are in this map. Here we go, here's the first one. Boom! And these are against fairly high armor squads. I still prefer it here than if they kept the ink trap for the follow-up, because I don't want my shooters to get hit by that. And that's, well, I'd rather not talk about that. But yeah, so worst case scenarios are facing one of these light AFWs at medium range, because their attack power actually increases a bit at that range, or medium AFWs with ink trap at medium range, or oh wow, they wasted no time, or four-leg AFWs at any range, because they don't actually get damage drop off even at short range. And they all have high anti-soldier power. Also, it looks like I pulled back that infantry squad just in time. Yeesh. Well, even so, even though that was really ugly, at least their infantry still got it worse than mine. But that's I beg your pardon. That's quite a first punch right there. Okay, Ryoko, it was just explained to you half a chapter ago that it's not actually a demon emblem, it's a bull emblem. What is going on with you? You're usually better than this. I don't understand. Now, what I'm going to do here is take advantage of a really weird enemy tendency, which is... Oh yeah, I'm gonna check their skills too. So the hit value of this at the start is very good at short range. It drops off a fair chunk at medium, but overall it's fairly good. At least, and I will always be grateful of this, their machine guns are not nearly as good at killing soldiers as Kinsato or Jun. I suspect that this was... I don't know, maybe they modified this because they thought it was really frustrating. I don't know. Maybe they just figured they'd give the player a break. Anyway, the tendency that I'm exploiting is... I'm going to interrupt myself because this is fairly important. Yeah, so the Russians are very insistent about not calling what was formerly the northern Japanese island by a Japanese name, because it's Russia now. Oh, okay, and they have concentration BAMPs for Japanese citizens as well. That's lovely. Well, of course, the West is not innocent of this either. I'd like to bring our attention to the camps in the US that had a similar purpose, I think. The only reason that they weren't thrown into a Siberian equivalent is that, as far as I know, the US didn't have one. Okay, so this is the first time that we're seeing Ippei in action, and it's gonna be a little strange, because I do not actually want him to trade punches with this anti-AFW, and the reason for that is he's going to lose a lot of shield health, and I want to preserve a little bit of that, if possible. Fortunately, I have tools for this. So, I also want to take a couple of anti-soldier shots. It's not actually going to do anything, because if Epei's main gun is bad, forget his machine gun for hitting soldier squads. It's not going to work. It actually loads faster than I thought it would, though. I also kind of like the way the game handles secondary weapons. Like, that stuff is not just for show, and I appreciate it. I'm kind of surprised that the enemy backed off there. And the main thing I want to do is put wire on the anti-AFW in front of me. And the reason is, I forget if I explained this already, but immobilized units can never punch back regardless of what's making them immobile. So even if, well, with the exception of squads moving from the front to the back or vice versa. Because then the AFW technically can't move, but I can still punch back. But if the legs are destroyed, or if there's wire, or I think someone under the effect of check fire can't hit back either, although I haven't tested that. Anyway, this is where I went into a problem, which is the reason I didn't send the wire up earlier was because their mechanics had cleanup like that, and I wanted to make sure they were in the front row when I threw out the wire so they couldn't fix it right away. Unfortunately, I wasn't paying very close attention, and apparently the distance was just a hair away from medium, which is to say there was a lot of steps between me and close combat range. And now that they don't have wire anymore, that is, it's not keeping them still anymore, I don't want to take a counter punch. The good news is, well, they decided to not charge forward, so I guess I didn't have to worry about that. That's actually very unusual for an anti-AFW, but whatever. And I also was not able to preserve the shield as much as I would like because they fired those APC shells as they like to do. And of course, sending my squad forward for another wire would be suicide, and good supply squads are sometimes hard to get. Not to mention, it's just bad form to lose a squad. Oh, the he that he's talking about. Colonel Minakawa. So, funny thing about that. He's on the map, you've seen him talk already, and he's kind of behind all of the other AFWs. He will leave after a certain amount of time. I think it's maybe a full day or maybe 3/4 of a day. And the requirement for getting a green squad is to engage him in battle and drive him off the battlefield before he would leave on his own. Well, that's crazy talk. But I'm gonna go for it anyway. Yep, those guys have ink trap too. Now, the ideal situation is if I engage them with one of my soldier killing units, they put the ink trap squad on the ground and I kill them off before the shell can be fired. As we saw right at the start of the map, though, that is by no means guaranteed. They love to load those ink trap shells up right away. Excuse me. So, the way to handle this is, I guess you just have to be really protective of your troops, but also know when you can absorb a shell or two to make things easier for later units to fight them. I don't know, it's a really tough judgment call to make sometimes. Also, I like this conversation because Ippei says, I knew that you guys were going to ask that. Yes, I'm fighting my own people, but look, you're South Japan, we're North Japan, we're already fighting our own people. Well, he doesn't say that specifically, but I suspect that's part of his thought processes, at least. Now, this is the weird thing. That light AFW, yeah, they could have attacked John at short range. Would have been really bad for me. He wouldn't have been able to hit anything that close. But the AI just loves to attack your medium AFWs, even if they're in better cover. I don't know why. I think it's because of the whole, if Weizsäcker gets knocked out, it's game over. Except, they do that to Ryoko too, and she doesn't have that particular game over penalty attached to her. Though, I mean, of course I don't want to lose any units anyway, so I don't know. But anyway, this is why it works out. She's in a good position to take out their troops on the enemy turn, which makes follow-ups pretty easy. She also starts on a friendly lookout, which is ridiculously rare. I mean, it makes sense that you don't see it very often because usually you're on the offense and this is a defense mission. You've seen the ratio of those two things by now. Still, wow, I did not notice that whatever it was going right for the camera during that focus thing. Well, so if I can get rid of that medic squad with smoke shot, things are going to be much easier for the follow-up. And well, it looks like our infantry is doing a pretty good job. And of course, Ryoko's observation is just about right. Wow. Wow, they took no time aiming for that. They're using the same strategy I am. Oh yeah, look, they were about to pull the medics back, but you see, this is why it's sometimes nice to have your units up front, because they're pretty good at taking those finishing shots like that. Anyway, smoke shot is gone. Ryoko has reasonable anti-AFW punch with their cannon. It's not exactly her strong point. Wow. They are determined. But this is actually probably for the best. And the reason is, if they were shooting at Ryoko in particular, that is her AFW, I'd be taking shield damage, and that's not repairable, or however you pronounce it. Ooh, that was a great last second shot, guys. Whereas soldier health can be recovered right back to max. And this is another thing that I want to talk about. There are several mechanics that kind of stack things against a player. As I've mentioned before, the enemy always outmasses you. That's just the way these tactics games work. And considering that the game is reasonably beatable, I guess it's fair, but still. One of the ways is special shells, of course. Like, the enemy can afford to throw those things at you right away without worry about supply because, well... Actually, that's the most pragmatic thing. And, of course, you have to conserve yours because you're dealing with a lot of enemies, and if you use them right away, you'd run out before half the map was over. And before I get further into that, the reason I was kind of debating on how to move John was that he starts in woods, and that is completely awful. He actually gets his next turn sooner if I move him to mountains. And that actually brings up another thing about how the tactical map works, which is, as you know, the action that you do determines when your next move is going to be. So, moving takes more time than standing by, so does attacking. Moving and then recovering puts a huge delay on you. However, moving and then attacking doesn't put any more delay on you than just moving. Also, wow, I started up just in time. I would not want to take a flash shot just as my load gauge filled up. Anyway. So, I've talked a little bit about why this particular setup works. One of the big things about it is that it, because it's all sniping, it ignores the enemy moving his squads, or its squads, to the back row. Of course. Now this throws me off, actually, more than you might think. One of my recon squads has repair. That seems great, right? Because it means that the nasty weapon shot I took gets fixed right away. Except that means that the snipe is delayed, which kind of threw off my time. Like, I did not know whether I should just wait for the second recon squad to charge up its snipe after using its repair. Oh yeah, this is the other reason why the snipe thing works well with 4 legs. Well, in addition to, of course, giving you ridiculous tactical map attack range, 4 legs have bombardment, which, well, drives the enemy to the back row. And with that, my recons can snipe them without any worry about being shot at in return. So it just works. It's unavoidable damage. 4 legs have pretty good anti-soldier stats on their own, and Bombard helps a lot. So what I ended up doing was having the squads go back and forth, one sniping and the other recharging, which looks great, but it ends up costing me more time than moving both at once would. Another nice thing about this build is that even if the enemy throws out special shells and deals some damage, it doesn't actually matter that much. And the reason is, on most maps, a 4-leg attacking from that far away, it is not going to be caught by anything. It's technically possible for some AFW setups to move far enough forward to hit a 4-leg that's attacking from a distance boosted by 2 scout units, but there's almost always something else in the way. Whew, that was close. I was lucky, I got some good shots. Wow. Right on the buzzer, too. So you've noticed that they're taking a lot of anti-soldier shots. I don't know whether or not it's the AI of these particular enemies, which actually would be a nice touch because they also bring lots of anti-soldier shells, or it's just generic AI logic, but I kind of like the way it all fits together. This being a defense mission, it's, well, actually it's about time to call it off, because we're hitting that 30-minute limit. I'll elaborate more on these things later, so see you then.